My husband had a tracker under my car and saw me at his friend's house every weekend. I need help. I really need advice from everyone. Hi, Redditors. My name is Irene, and I really messed up. I don't think I can escape from this. This would be a bit of a long story, so please read it through. It's a bit complicated, and I'm in big soup. I am 25 years old. My husband's name is Fred, or should I say ex-husband, because he might soon divorce me. He is 27 years old. There's a reason I'm so worried and asking for advice, so I'll just start from the beginning. My life has not been the usual smooth life ever since I was little. My parents fought all the time, and I have two siblings, Jeremiah and Martins. They are twins, and they are both 19 years old right now. I am 6 years older than them. I was the one that usually stayed with the boys in their room anytime my parents fought because the twins always cried, so I had to keep them busy. My parents always ended up apologizing to me after, saying it was just little arguments and that it wasn't going to happen again, but that was a lie, and I should have known. It continued for some years, that is, throughout my middle school. I overheard a friend of theirs talking to my mom and telling her that her and dad should get therapy and that they needed it. They followed their advice, and I wished they never did because it led to their breakup. My mom and dad divorced when I was in my last year of high school. I just turned 18 then, and the boys had turned 12. Since they were still underage, my mom got custody of them because she argued that she could take better care of them since they were still little. That wasn't the only reason. The boys were calling her name in the courtroom throughout the case, so the judge saw the evidence that the boys wanted to be with her, so she agreed. Meanwhile, I, on the other hand, was going to stay with my dad. The custody thing didn't matter since I was already of age, but I didn't want my dad to be alone. I knew I was going to miss the twins' presence, and it wasn't going to be the same going to see them in Mum's place. Yet I had to stay with Dad. Dad took care of me very well and paid for my college fees by the time I was 19. I had already taken a job then because I didn't want to put a lot on Dad since he was going to be paying child custody for Mum too. I was working at a fast food restaurant, and I was just on the evening shift since I had classes in the morning. It was stressful, but I had no choice because everything on my mind was that it was going to help Dad. I got fired from my job due to them being overstaffed, and they had to let some people go. Unluckily, I was one of them. I didn't give up there because in my second year, I found another job at a fast food restaurant, and the pay was going great. I didn't know everything was going to change when I met Fred. I was in my third year and still trying to cope with mixing classes and working together, so it was very tiring. A guy walked in that day and made an order. I didn't pay him much attention at first, but he came the next to order food, and he came the next day again. I didn't complain about anything because there was nothing to complain about. He started making small talk one day, asking me how my day had been, and before I knew it, I was expecting his visits. The acquaintances I made at the shop teased me anytime he had left the shop, saying something similar to, "He was my secret admirer." I just laughed it off most times, but I won't lie that it made me feel some kind of way. I didn't know his name, but he knew mine due to my name tag on my clothes, so I got the courage to ask him, and he said his name was Fred. I liked his name, and that wasn't the only thing I liked about him. I also loved his smile and the way he talked. I was looking forward to my breaks because he started coming during my breaks to spend time with me. We talked a lot on our breaks, like our age and family. I was 20 at that time, and he was 22. We ended up exchanging contacts, and he told me he wasn't going to come much due to some personal issues, but he would be calling me. I didn't ask him anything about it because it wasn't my business per se. I kept to my usual routine of going to classes in the morning, work in the evening, but this time he called at night. We talked about this particular night, and he said he liked me. He asked me out, but I turned him down because I knew the relationship was stressful. I had never dated anyone, but I knew how it looked because I'd seen it with my friends, and it was also a lot of responsibility. I didn't think I could cope with it with all my academic and financial issues. On the holiday, I went to my dad's place, and Fred said he wanted to come with me. I was wondering why, but I said, sure, why not? He greeted my dad and said something so absurd like he liked me and wanted to date, so he was going to wait till we were done with college. He asked my dad for approval if he could go on with his plans of courting me, and my dad smiled and said he liked him so he could. Fred was not kidding about that. He followed through with his words and courted me till we graduated from college. People think we were dating, but I said we weren't, and it was not a relationship. It didn't become easier for me after college because I started thinking about how to get another job. And I couldn't work in a fast food restaurant throughout because I would need to pay for a lot of things. I had quit from the fast food job some days before I graduated from college. I was 22 at that time, and I felt like I had not done anything with my life. The biggest surprise came to me one day. I told Fred I needed a job and if he knew anyone that was hiring. I studied computer science in college, so I was pretty good in problem solving, coding, and typical skills like that. He told me that day that he was looking for a personal assistant to manage his tasks, and also he could hire me if I was interested. I thought he was joking, so I tapped his hands and laughed, but he just smiled and gave me a card with his name on it. He was a financial tech, something I don't want to go into details about, but it's related to software engineering and the likes. Long story short, it meant he was a very rich person and he needed a personal assistant. It was nothing to think long on, so I kissed him and accepted the job. That was one of my biggest mistakes. He wanted to hire me just directly, but I didn't want that. So I did the whole contract thing with him. I was shocked when I saw the pay because I had never seen those figures before. I thought he increased the pay for me, but he told me this was how he paid regular employees. But because I was a personal assistant, of course the pay was going to be higher. We did the whole contract thing the next day, and I started immediately. I worked there for about 2 months, and Fred asked me out on a date. He said he hadn't stopped courting me. I accepted since I was already in a good spot and I was okay financially. The pay was monthly and it was a lot, so I was able to give some to my dad and also to my mom. I still keep in touch with my mom and the twins because I loved them too. I went out with Fred and it was one of the best days I had ever had. He made me feel special and gave me everything I ever wanted. He was the best guy ever, but I didn't know my thoughts were going to change on that. Fred and I dated for a year, but since we knew ourselves throughout college, we basically knew everything about each other. Fred asked me out one day, and I thought it was going to be like every other day, but I was wrong. I was shocked when he went down on one knee and proposed to me. I didn't doubt him for a second, so I said yes immediately. I met with Fred's parents, and they were very lovely to me, but he had told me before that he didn't really like his parents much because they had pushed him to do things that they wanted, not things he wanted. I told him to forgive them, and he did by making up and calling them anytime he was free. We got married when I was 24 years old. The marriage was a huge one, and I saw many people I hadn't seen before. Dad came, and Mom also came with the twins. I hadn't seen the twins for a while, so they hugged me tight when they saw me. They were 18 years old, and they told me they just entered college. I promised them I would be helping them with anything, so they should feel free to ask. The marriage ended, and I was already tired. Fred and I went on a honeymoon, and it was fun being with him. We didn't forget about work, and we continued after the whole marriage and honeymoon thing. Fred had a partner at work, and it was a guy who was in his 30s. He still looked young, but I never really talked to him, so I just observed him. His name is Jim, and he traveled a lot for the business deals abroad while Fred handled the business deals within the country. It was a great compromise for both of them to make everything easier. Fred had bought an apartment, so I moved in and we started living together. We wanted kids, but we planned that it was so soon and we could get kids anytime, so it wasn't a big deal. Saturdays and Sundays were my day off, but Fred usually had to go to work on some weekends to deal with things. This particular day on a Saturday, I was at home just finishing up cleaning chores when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I thought maybe Fred had ordered something and it was the delivery guy. I didn't have my bath yet since I was doing chores, but I was wearing shorts and a top. I didn't pay it no mind since it was just to collect the package and sign it so he leaves. I opened the door, and alas, it was Jim. I felt embarrassed, but I don't know why. Maybe it was because I felt so weird with my husband's friend partner seeing me in shorts and top with my scattered bun, but I still tried to remain calm. I think I spotted him eyeing me because his eyes moved up and down on me. I cleared my throat and greeted him. He told me he just got back and he came to see Fred, but he tried his number and he wasn't picking. I told him to come inside because it was not okay for him to keep standing outside. When he came in and passed beside me, I don't know if it was the perfume or body spray he used, but he smelled great. Jim sat down and I couldn't help but admire him. This was the first time I was alone with him, and I don't know what it was, but he looked different. I don't know what it was, but there was this feeling in the air, and it was awkward. I thought about going to change my clothes, but it was going to be weird if I suddenly changed them, so I just sat there on the couch that was opposite him and began pressing my phone. I was going to try and bring up a conversation with him, but he spoke first. He asked me how my marriage was randomly, and he laughed because he knew it sounded weird. I told him it was going great. That was how we began talking, and I didn't know it would lead to different things. He was telling me different stories related to his work and things with clients. I also told him how things were at work. It was fun with him, and we were laughing so hard. Jim's phone rang, and it was Fred on the line. I didn't hear what Fred said because it wasn't on speaker, but I was sure he couldn't come back that day with the way Jim was talking. I was right because Fred called me immediately and told me he couldn't come back because of some business till the next day. I understood because it was like this sometimes, and I had no complaints. He also asked if it was all right if Jim could stay for the night because he couldn't go home since he just came back from overseas and his house was still far away. I hesitated, and I didn't know what I was thinking. My mind thought of dirty things, and I was disgusted with myself. I told Fred that there was no problem with that, and it was okay with me if he stayed. I got off the call, and Jim apologized, saying he wanted to say it, but Fred said it first about the whole him staying over thingy. I just laughed it off, and I said it was okay. I showed him to the guest room we had, and he thanked me. I used that chance to shower, but during my shower time, I had this thought of going over to Jim's side naked. I know that's a crazy thought, but I'm not the only one that has had random thoughts like that, right? Anyways, I was able to clean up and change my clothes into comfortable clothes. Time had passed, and it was already getting late, so I made dinner for both of us. He thanked me and said he enjoyed the food, and I smiled at what he said. The next thing he told me was that he loved my smile. I don't know what happened, but there was this silence of us looking at each other, and I broke contact. I didn't want to stay around him any longer because my mind was already going crazy. I told him goodnight and slept off alone that night, wishing someone was with me in bed, mostly thinking about Jim. I don't know what was coming over me, and it was just weird. The next morning came, and by the time I woke up, he was already dressed. He thanked me for letting him stay the night and said he already talked to Fred on the phone, so he had to leave early. I wanted him to ask for my numbers, but he didn't, so I didn't say anything. My husband came back that day some hours later, and he didn't smell the same as Jim. I didn't like that, and something in me wanted to see Jim again. That night, I did something very strange. I waited for my husband to go to sleep, and I took his phone, searching for Jim's number. It was the first number in his contacts list, so it was easy. I copied his number into his phone, and I planned to text him anytime I was alone, and Fred wasn't around, so he wouldn't suspect. Fred told me he was going to be more busy because he got a business deal to work up in the city, and I understood. I still worked from Monday, Friday, so the Saturday I was looking forward to had come. I texted Jim saying it was me, and I was surprised when he said he was glad I texted him. We kept texting and talking about random things, and it was strange how both of us were giving off the same energy. He told me that he wouldn't be traveling for some time because he had finished up what he wanted to do overseas. I told him I was bored staying home with Fred not being around, and he asked me if I wanted to come over to his side. It was so sudden, and I was shocked at that. I didn't think that was something he could say, and my mind never went there, but I wanted to go to his house to meet him. He sent me his location, so I got into my car and went to his house. His house was way different than ours. It was small just for one person, so I knew he didn't have a wife, but there was no way he couldn't have a girlfriend. He welcomed me and told me to feel at home. I still couldn't believe I was at my husband's friend's house, but here I was, already taking wine with him. The wine was non-alcoholic, so I couldn't blame the wine for what happened. I don't know what led to it, but I slept with Jim. One moment, we were talking and laughing about funny things. The other moment, we were kissing and I was on top of him. It was so crazy, and I told him we shouldn't be doing this because I was married and my husband was his friend. He asked me if I wanted to really stop, and I said no. So yes, that was how I slept with Jim, and something I know I should have stopped. It was getting late, so I cleaned up and got dressed. He told me he wanted to see me again, but I said I could not. By the time I got home, it was already dark, and Fred was waiting for me. He asked me where I went, so I lied to him and told him that I went shopping, but the car broke down on the road. He believed me, and that night ended, but I couldn't stop thinking about Jim. I kept texting with him, and it was always fun. I kept looking forward to the weekend to see him. When I was free on Sundays, I used the chance to meet up with him in his house. This was going on for a month, and I knew I should have stopped, but I didn't. My husband kept asking me every weekend where I was going, that made me come back late, but I always found a way to escape from his questions and bring up lies. Everything came crashing one day when I went to Jim's house on the weekend. I was in the living room with Jim drinking wine and laughing when I heard a knock on the door. Jim went to open it and he froze, but I understood why when I saw Fred walk into the house. I was shocked, and I started stuttering and asking him what he was doing in Jim's house. He told me he knew something was up since I came home late and I didn't know it, but I was smelling like Jim. He said he had been suspecting something since I came home, always smelling like Jim. I didn't think that was a thing, but he was probably right, since Jim had a strong perfume scent around him. That still didn't explain what he was doing there, so I asked him how he knew I was here. He told me he put a tracker under my car so he would be able to track me. Can you believe it? Anyways, he kept saying things and he asked me if I had slept with him. I was about to deny it, but Jim said yes. We had slept together. I didn't know what was going through Jim's head, but he said something like he had finally gotten him back after all these years. Jim said it was easy to get me and he was glad. He just laughed and said so many words that hurt me while also telling my husband he had done his revenge. Fred left the house and I was asking Jim what he meant by revenge, but he didn't say anything. He told me to ask Fred, so I went home to meet him. When I got home, he wasn't around, so please, I'm worried. What do I do because I'm so confused? Should I keep asking Jim because I don't know how to talk to Fred? I need help. Asterisk, asterisk, comments, asterisk. 1. Asterisk, asterisk, u/Reddit user. 1. Asterisk, asterisk. I have so many questions and I don't even know where to start. Why would you suddenly start having feelings for another man because he was making you laugh more than your husband? Why would you even agree to go to his friend's house? I didn't know ladies were like this. 2. Asterisk, asterisk, u/Reddit user 2. Asterisk, asterisk. Whoa, this is a crazy story. I honestly think you should talk to Fred and hear it all from the horse's mouth. But you really messed up, Irene. You can't just start having feelings for another man just because he smells nicer than your husband. If that was how women were thinking, everyone would have gotten divorced by now. 3. Asterisk, asterisk, u/Reddit user. 3. Asterisk, asterisk. Obviously, there's something that's between Fred and Jim since Jim said something about revenge. Did Fred sleep with Jim's wife or something in that way? You should hear it all from Fred and make sure you talk to him. He's your husband, so you can't just let this marriage fail because you guys have been together since. 4. Asterisk, asterisk, u/Reddit user 4, asterisk, asterisk. So you're telling me you cheated on your husband, a man who you built up a strong relationship with over the years, with his friend, someone who you talked to in a day? Jim ended up using you for a certain revenge. He sounds very petty. I doubt Fred will still want to be with you, but at least he would forgive you, so talk to him. Update. My marriage is officially ruined and I know it was all my fault. Fred came home and I talked to him. I asked him what Jim meant and he told me he had a little issue in college when he was courting me. He had known Jim since then and Jim had a girlfriend. His girlfriend made a move on Fred and Jim keeps blaming him. It was a very petty thing and I dragged myself into it. I regret what I did and I shouldn't have been fooled by Jim. Fred apologized for the tracker thing and said he shouldn't have done it, but I said it was okay because I would accept anything after what I did. He said he couldn't be with me after what had happened. I begged him at first, but there was no use in begging anymore because he wasn't listening. Just like that, our marriage had come to an end. He divorced me and left me with the house. It felt so empty there, so I went back to my dad. I told him what happened and he said I learnt my lesson, which was true. Don't get fooled like I did and stay true to your marriage. I wish I could redo things, but sadly there's no way. Fred, I hope you find someone better.